conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to get my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said, and what I said I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause this here for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in, no rushing. But time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it, but it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
All right. Welcome back to the conversation with Harold and Dave. I am Keone, and I am here with Dave. And on the line, we have Harold. So we are talking about a topic today that I was saying before the show came on to Dave and Harold that I feel like every generation we're having this conversation of teacher pay. Um, Dave, what are your thoughts just overall on this whole discussion about teacher pay? And do you feel like we're ever going to not be talking about teacher pay?
Well, I think that, this has been perennial. I remember when I was a teenager in the late 70s, early 80s. I graduated high school in 82. And it was already, that was just a constant lament. Now, of course, I spent a lot of time with teachers. I am now a professor. I am paid as at a university scale. So that's something different, right? I'm not in that area. My sister is. Um, and I'm going to say this about it just substantively. Um, there is that idea. One, do we pay these people enough? And you get what you pay for, and there's all of that. And that is one area that we can look at. Another area approach to it is the more market-based approach that says, "Hey, look, you need to attract people, and what is fair pay? Fair pay for someone is more than they could get, or as much as they could get anywhere else, right? I mean, in a market-based analysis, we say, what are your alternative choices? What would you get? And we start asking questions about, are we getting enough qualified people? Are they leaving the industry? That sort of thing. And that becomes a different way of looking at it. And I don't know which one is better. But there's also just the last thing is, we're paying people to create a value that is realized by other people at a later date. And so I think one of the challenges at all times is a teacher works, creates education in a student. Well, that student doesn't get a job, doesn't they don't do things until later, and the benefits of what they do are realized by the student, by the person, and and when they're realized by them, the government does benefit from people paying more in taxes because they earn more, and the society benefits by having someone who's better, productive, a better citizen, that sort of thing. But there's a divorce between, you put the parents and the current taxpayers, there's a interpersonal separation of who's paying versus who's benefiting. There's also a temporal separation. And so these are I think, three of the things that are just in this discussion that be thought about.
It's something very important that I got out of that is that you don't realize the effect of a teacher, most people, until later. So if that teacher taught you in the seventh grade and had an impact, a lot of times you're not understanding that impact until you're 20 something years old, to sum up what you're saying. Um, Harold.
Well, being a 23 plus year educator and administrator in the public school system, I'm always an advocate for better teacher pay and benefits. Because once you get into that arena and have done that work, you don't understand all of the stresses that come with it. Not only that, but you don't understand the disrespect that goes along with it as well. And as a result, we end up as a society, are we willing to invest in teachers who are really investing in the future of our country? So if we are offering higher or better salaries as part of that investment plan, then you're going to attract or draw in higher quality of candidates to be brought into those classrooms to do all of the necessary work that needs to be done. Because remember, when that child enters into that classroom in, for example, pre-K or kindergarten, you got a blank slate. And it's just like an artist having a blank canvas that they're getting ready to create a work. And we don't know the value of that work at that time, but over time, it begins to appreciate at a level really that it's going to be hard to put a price tag on. So I think when we look at this whole thing of teacher pay, I don't see it as pay. I see it as investment. The same way when I invested in my daughter to go to a pre-K center that was deemed one of the better ones in our community. And it set her up for where she is now, being an honor roll student at every 9-week period in senior high school. There had to be a foundation that was laid. And I think once we show teachers the respect that they are due by way of compensation, by way of even treatment, then we'll see the results that we desire. Because if we don't, we're going to not get the best of what's potentially available. And then we're going to complain that we don't have a strong or a high quality education system, which in the end is not going to produce the end result we desire and or need as a society. So I think definitely I'm a strong advocate for better teacher pay. As a matter of fact, since teachers do the bulk of the work, I would pay them more than I pay administrators. That's just me. Because administrators are not the ones that are in the classroom, in the front lines on a daily basis. Not just dealing with the instructional aspect of it, but you got to deal with the social dynamics. You got to deal with discipline. You got to deal with a number of things in which that child may be coming into that classroom, i.e. maybe dealing with some level of trauma. But you still find a way to motivate that child to desire and appreciate an education. So I'm going to land my plane there as we advance this discussion.
Well, I think you're going to have that discussion with most jobs over management, administrative over the employee. But one of the things that people are going to say, well, we know which people are going to say is, and it's a legitimate argument, is we could pay them more, and the question is always how. We're not talking about private schools where you've never seen a lot of teachers complaining about their pay, or universities where pay scales are determined by the amount of revenue that school intakes. But public schools, with a lot of them that are overcrowding, that's going to be your argument over the public school doesn't make money. Money is given to those public schools. That's why a lot of public schools do all of these extracurricular things to kind of draw in money. I mean, when we went to elementary and high school, you only graduated at high school. Now they have a graduation ceremony for almost every section. That's another way to sell pictures. It's another way to sell yearbooks. It's another way to kind of capitalize and get some revenue. So how do we fix that part? You can't pay teachers more money if there's not more money being given to those public schools, because that's what we're basically talking about when we're talking about teachers pay, public schools. Am I wrong?
I think we should be, and I think public schools are important, and I think they're where most kids go, and they are much maligned, and I think unrightfully or unjustly so. And the thing is that you're bringing up the issue, though, is that look, they don't generate revenue. They don't, and so the paying of teachers requires you to tax people, and that's not popular. it very often requires you to move money from one area to another, right? And to and because a big question, some schools within a state, even because we know the states vary dramatically in how much they pay teachers. In North Carolina right now, the governor has been talking about how North Carolina pays $5,000 less per pupil each year than most other states, and so he's addressing that as a state priority. Um, but you have a lot of problems, like um, you if are who's paying, and it varies. Sometimes it's municipalities. Where I grew up, Glen Ridge, New Jersey, very small town, one of the top 10 public schools systems in New Jersey. But my parents paid $20,000 a year in property taxes because the town was basically subsidizing, was a municipality that was, had a prep school, basically a college prep school. If you go into another town nearby where it's a municipality, well, they may not be as affluent. There are people, may not be paying $10,000 a year or $20,000 a year, and so you have less money for the teachers. And so, and your problem is that one, are we talking about within a state putting more money into maybe schools in uh, less affluent areas, right? And the thing is that you might be like, oh, well, these are these other people getting it, right? So I don't want to do that, right? So that becomes an argument against doing it. You also have this problem of when you invest, are you investing in people that are going to be in your community later, even? I mean, even if the town or county does it, are these people going to leave, take their education and leave? Which, by the way, New Jersey is a major exporter of educated people, especially college educated people. And to that, New Jersey, to a sense, is doing that. And that complicates rationales of investment. It doesn't, it is an investment. Harold's exactly right. It is an investment. It's a complex one, right? It's in terms of who's benefiting, who's paying, and that sort of thing, and where the payoff is coming back, and so there's a lot of issues in there. And I'll
Harold?
just bat it back to y'all.
Well, again, looking at where does teacher pay come from when we're looking at our budgets, and at one point, education, say in the state of Florida, you had roughly 40 to 45% of education dollars coming from local government, another 40 to 45% coming from the state, and then 10% coming from the national or federal government. Well, again, it's property taxes that generate those particular revenues. And part of the challenge that we've had, and I've been voicing this locally as well as on the state level, we have too much quote unquote affordable housing and not enough, if any, affordable home ownership. So affordable housing pulls from the system, whereas home ownership puts into the system. And once that investment or those dollars go into the system, now you have more revenues to properly allocate what those compensations should look like, so it's not an issue. On the other side of that, you also have state taxes where, we all have to pay into. And if we look at how, again, those dollars are being allocated. If we go to federal level, I'll tell you quick, let's shave some of the defense budgets since they're not willing to pay military personnel more money than enough what they deserve for what they do. Then we need to put it in education. If we're not going to do it for them, let's do it for the teachers. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have an educated society, we won't have people that are able to help develop that new technology that's going to help us, God forbid, in the next war or next skirmish that we may end up getting involved in. But backpedaling to where I was before, again, look at where we can get those revenues generated from will help us determine what our steps moving forward should be. And if we're not going to look at property taxes and creating more opportunity for property taxes to be that investment tool or that revenue generating tool, then we miss the opportunity to do what is necessary for our children who are the best. Yes, now we had brain drain in South Florida as well, where many of the children, and that's really not so much because of the children themselves, but the conditions in South Florida are such that with some children, when they go away to college, they don't want to come back. All because of the conditions of the community. Now, if they had come back, they may have been a formidable force to change those conditions. However, when we go back, and again, I don't want to get off base, but when we look at our education system, the only way you can fix something is if you invest in it so that it can give you the desired outcome. And through that desired outcome, we'll see the residual effects. But until we have a mindset to devote that energy there, then we're going to continue to see the problems and experience the challenges that we have in our education system.
I don't know if many people are considering or think the way of what Dave said, because what he just said, I never thought about that. Because you were saying, you keep talking about the investment and the residual effects, but like Dave was pointing out, yeah, I invest in this community in Goulds, Florida, for this community, and then everyone goes to school and graduates, and they go make money and pay taxes in Atlanta and in LA or wherever they've moved. I'm not receiving that residual effect in that specific community. Not saying that a majority of people do that, but we do have places where you can point out where the majority of people leave. I have a friend that lives in South Dakota, and I asked a girl that was visiting from North Dakota, I said, well, what do you do in North Dakota? She said, we go to school, we graduate, and then we leave, and go somewhere else.
And it's hard to make the case that North Dakota should be investing more in its education if they're just going to export it because they never get the payoff, which is arguably an argument for a greater, in the numbers Harold put there. Did you notice how small the federal government's slice was? Right? 10%. And the thing is, if you educate an American, very few Americans actually go overseas, right? Most Americans, I don't know. I could see that a typical American would move from one state to another in their life, right? It would be not atypical for them to do that. For an American to leave the United States and work somewhere else would be a bit bizarre. So if the federal government invests money in a student and gets them going, and then the federal government doesn't recoup the investment, there's a federal income tax, yes, right? So if we can get you, and this is one reason why it makes sense that there's federal money going into college at the college level, right? You get a lot more federal money involved in, at least in loans, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But in the end, you get it back, right? And so if I hear 40-40-10 or 45 or whatever, I'm like, yeah, the federal slice is too small, because they're the ones who will unequivocally are most likely to benefit. And so from that rationale of investment, right, the municipality, probably not. I can tell you for a fact from my high school class, there are more people living in North Carolina than live in my hometown of Glen Ridge. In fact, I think, I can count on one hand the number of people that stayed in that town, because it's a town where you go, you send your kids to school, and then you move the hell out, and your kids move the hell out. No one lives there. It's incredibly affluent, okay? And it is not the most affluent one in that area, but but you see what I'm saying is that there is a lot of that. But the federal government is in the end going to capture the benefit. And so it would make more sense for them to pay more of the percentage.
I have a question for Harold because he's got to get out of here. So, and Harold, you're more educated on this part than I am. What are the levels of funding? So, for instance, when you're looking at a school that's, let's say, in South Miami, it's in the city of South Miami, it's in Dade County, it's in the state of Florida, and then it's in the United States. So is that 4 levels of funding for that school, or is it just the city, the county, the state? How does that work?
Well, usually, in Miami-Dade County, if you're incorporated, though, your property tax dollars goes to that particular municipality. So you're not going to get money from the county as well as the city. Those, again, property tax dollars are going to go to the school district, regardless of whether your property is in Miami-Dade County, regardless of the municipality. Municipalities aren't responsible for paying for the different schools. Now, some municipalities have their own private schools, which, they've incorporated, and they're using their tax dollars to educate the residents or those that live within that municipality, which is fine. But I think the other piece of this, when we look at funding, and you have also a number of different factors, because in Florida, it's a flat rate per student per county, meaning depending upon the cost of living in said county, you may get more per student, more per pupil than other counties. Sometimes, depending upon where you are, you may get less. Giving you an example, Miami-Dade County, you will get per pupil between $8,000 to $8,500 per student. Now, challenge that you have is, and I call it our priority problem. Going back to statistics again, if you're investing as a society $8,500, state of Florida, $8,500 per student in Miami-Dade County. However, if I'm an inmate in Florida, that amount per inmate per year is between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. So when we look at teacher pay or teacher compensation, I find it disrespectful at best that we can sit up and invest on less than $10,000 a year per student, but then you got $30,000 to $50,000 a year going to incarcerate someone, knowing that if our education system was operating at optimal level, you wouldn't have, first of all, you wouldn't have the demand for private prisons, but you wouldn't have the numbers that you have, $30,000 to $50,000 to house an inmate, to incarcerate. We got a priority problem in America. And like, as I was alluding to before, when we look at these numbers, when we look at these statistics, even in Florida, our Republican state, that 45-45-10 split is not slowly, and that was when I first got in 23 years ago. So that has slowly shrunk to where the state's paying less and less almost every year, and the local government has to pay more and more. Now, the other piece that we have, as far as when we're talking revenues and monies and things of that nature and prioritizing, we got to look at the fact that, as I alluded to earlier, affordable housing versus affordable home ownership. Home ownership, you pay what? Property taxes. When we talk about affordable housing, the system has to pay into it. So that's not additional revenues. Well, 80% of the new development in southern part of Miami-Dade County, where everybody else is landlocked, with the exception of Miami Lakes and a couple of other areas, 80% of the development is housing, rental housing, not ownership, home ownership opportunities. So again, that's going to take more out of instead of putting into our system as far as taxes are concerned, and it only benefits the developers. So if we're going to attack this problem with education, first of all, it's going to require larger investment. Yes, you're going to have to shift monies from here, there, or anywhere. Or better yet, if you look at the fact that 40% of Americans don't pay income taxes, that's lost revenue. So even when I hear arguments about overspending and this, that, or the other, we don't have the money. We have the money, people aren't paying taxes. So to address the issues that I think that were brought forth in this discussion, we're going to have to look at how we can, one, close these loopholes where these people are not paying taxes. When you got an Amazon making $100 billion a year and paying zero in taxes, that's a problem. So we have to step back and look at what we can do to get the revenues where they need to be. We need to make sure, because if we as a country, we spend billions, if not trillions a year in our political process alone, that money can be better used elsewhere. elevating our community, getting people that are homeless or houseless into some level of residence, helping them recuperate, recover, and be reinstated and reinstalled back into our society. So I thank you for the opportunity of having this conversation, but it needs to happen more frequently. It needs to be happening on a broader scale, and we definitely need to be finding some advocacy work so that we can do what's in the best interest of our children, which are the future of our country, because we don't want them to have a free education when it comes to college, but then we're going to give them a $35 trillion deficit or credit card. Make it make sense.
Dave, I saw you deep in thought, or I mistakenly may have thought you deep in thought. You might have been thinking about what you're eating this evening, but
we're getting off into a tax.
Yeah,
we're getting off into a tax discussion, and which is not is a different one, and so I was actually looking at some things with that, and let's not go there too much. That's a separate discussion of these things. I will say though, rich people don't pay no taxes. They pay. Jeff Bezos paid $972 million in taxes. The one I was able to look up. The thing is that his tax rate, a lot of people, if they look at his wealth, they say his tax rate is very low. But it's like, well, he has wealth, not income. And but the thing is that the thing about income taxes, especially federal income taxes, is the people who do well, who generally are educated, right? They have upend, right? And you get more money. Property is just taxed as property rate. And the kind of taxes that Florida has are incredibly regressive, right? They take a bigger percentage from poorer people. And that is a big problem. And that is one reason that Florida is becoming increasingly difficult to live in. And, one thing I worry about when I hear Florida, we don't have an income tax. Aren't we wonderful? And I'm like, well, you've got different incentives, right? You are getting more money from poor people. So the state doesn't even, in terms of this investment, have an incentive to invest in its people to make the people in the state better off, because it doesn't, just from that pure pecuniary, money calculus, because they're not getting the money from the richer people, the people who are making more money. And we can talk about the fairness of the tax code, because there's a lot there. We can go into it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that in my mind, I'm more focused on this issue, that Florida is not capturing the benefits that it might get from better education. And so it's a broken system on both sides, would be my point.
Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, Harold says, I don't know if you can hear him, it's kind of low. Harold says, you agree. We'll definitely have a part 2 to this discussion and go more in the weeds. We are going to have a discussion in a couple of weeks. We're going to have Dr. Camille from Pretty Smart and Dr. Cello from the Cello Show on. We're going to be talking a lot about higher education. But right now, what we're going to get into, we haven't done it in a while, but we're going to get into one of the favorite segments from a lot of people who watch this show, which is Dave's Ukraine update. Let's get it started.
Okay.
Wait, hold on, Dave. You got imagery. Thank you, Harold. All right, Dave. You got 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, hell, that's an intro. And wow, got to live up to that. Ukraine, what's going on? We have a shifting situation here. I don't know exactly what's going on. There's a lot of uncertainty, which is, I think, the story. And what are some of the things that we're uncertain about, and what's going on? Clearly, the U.S. contributions to Ukraine, we are seeing that come into question. And so the future of Ukraine's effort is going to be very impacted by the domestic politics of the United States. And already they are not getting money because of the partisanship bickering that's going on. NATO is stepping up, right? We just this last couple days, the EU, NATO, they've all been doubling down. They're buying more ammunition. They're committing to support Ukraine. And they are trying to, I think, shore up some of what the U.S. shortfall is. At the same time, the U.S. is not doing nothing. A lot of the things that we have put into the pipeline are there. And we're seeing that, certainly the Ukrainians are now making full use of a lot of the equipment we gave them. And just a week or two ago, the word of the day was Franken-SAM, where SAM, surface to air missile, and then Frankenstein. And apparently the U.S. over the last 6 months has gone in and kind of MacGyvered a bunch of systems, and they've taken surplus U.S. almost obsolete systems like the Sea Sparrow missile, which was on naval ships and provided a kind of before the Seawees, you might know the Gatling gun, the R2D2 looking thing that shoots stuff down. The Sea Sparrow had a little bit more range, but it was a point defense missile system, which shoot down airplanes and cruise missiles coming at the ship. That has been replaced on most ships with the rolling airframe missile, different missile. It looks like the point is that it still works. It's still a good system. And we got a bunch of them in a warehouse. So we got Russian surface-to-air missile chassis, the launchers, right? The vehicle. We married the Sea Sparrow up, and we are sending them to Ukraine, right? And so it's a vehicle the Ukrainians know how to fix. They have them. They got the parts for them. And then we slap this missile on. We've been taking Sidewinder missiles, slapping them on every damn thing. And so there's a lot of, and so the Franken-SAMs have been going over to support Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine is using Patriots. They just recently shot down a Russian A-50, which is, for lack of a better term, a Russian AWACS plane that was flying over the Sea of Azov. And it was standing off in the distance where they thought the Ukrainians couldn't hit them. And the significance of this aircraft is it has a lot of electronic warfare, a lot of surveillance, and it could see that it was monitoring the state of Ukrainian air defenses and helping to launch missiles and do things. Ukrainians blew it out of the sky. And the Russians are like, oh, we didn't think you could do that. And the rest of the world is like, oh, we didn't think you could do that. So, also, Ukraine is manufacturing its own drones. And they have been hitting targets. They hit a target up by St. Petersburg, an oil refinery. And there have been pictures of Russian air defense systems being moved in there. They have hit the Baltic, the Black Sea Fleet, and they've been taking out targets at greater range. And so now areas in Russia that are logistic facilities are now threatened, and the Russians are having to defend them at greater range. So Ukraine has definitely leveled up in terms of its ability to attack land targets and to attack aircraft at range. And so we're seeing them, do that. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Russians have been continuing this kind of, mindless attack. Avdiivka, they tried to do a Bakhmut in Avdiivka. Now, Bakhmut, they took Bakhmut. And what did it get them? It got them absolutely nothing. They haven't moved an inch from it. In fact, they've lost ground around it. They've been going into Avdiivka, which is a town right on the original border of the separatist areas that they were never able to get into. So I guess it just offended them that they hadn't moved the line. And, they're losing hundreds of armored vehicles, thousands of troops in this, and the Ukrainians are tearing them up. And so the Ukrainians uh, have been, holding the line. Now they have challenges, right? The Ukrainians are now facing a manpower challenge. The initial verve of, the people that wanted to join to defend the country. Well, they've been trained. They've been brought in. They sent a lot of them through training camps in Britain, and I believe I saw that those training camps had shut down, right? Because they don't have the raw recruits anymore. So Ukraine is now flirting with conscription and trying to get more people out of its population in the fight. So the Ukraine itself is um, kind of reached its max manpower, right? And from now on, it's gonna have a problem. So there's not much room for growth there. They're gonna have to therefore qualitatively improve. And it's good that they are getting better weapons from the West, and they're going to need to keep doing that. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. F-16s are coming. I've seen actual footage of Ukrainian pilots flying F-16s in training missions. And there was one of a Ukrainian woman who was being taught by an American woman. And so they were, bringing that out that was something that they thought was cool. The first Ukrainian woman, and I'm like, well, that probably means that there are a bunch of Ukrainian guys there too. And so there you go, right? And we've got these pilots who are good pilots, are already trained as pilots, who are now learning. At some point they're going to get F-16s, which is going to give them a better capability um, on the battlefield, but not huge, right? The thing is, without U.S. support, there's not a sense of this growing wave, but this kind of bubbling up of qualitative things. But always there's the concern that U.S. support will drop down, and I think that that's in the end very has a strategic effect of convincing the Russians that, well, we just need to hang on, right? If we hang on and Donald Trump gets elected, then in January 2025, it's going to be a very different world, and we can realize real gains against them. Um, that's January 2025, but that is just 1 year from now. And so the Russians probably, as they look at the U.S., as they look at our political thing, they are going to take great, if not, Putin, they can rationally look at the situation and say, hey, look, there's a chance of something really good happening to us in the sense of getting if you could get Donald Trump as president, that would just throw a whole wrench in everything. And so Putin is going to, not be encouraged to chill out, to make peace or anything, right? And so the Russians are not going to stop. The question is, in this intervening year, will the Ukrainians, with diminished U.S. support, be able to keep ratcheting up the ability and screw up Russia's attempts to hold its land, to hold Crimea, and that. So that's where we are. These are the unknowns, the uncertainties that are playing out right now. That's what I got.
Thank you. Oh, no, everybody can't hear me. Thank you, Dave. Well, that is the wrong screen. Phone. Oh, that is the wrong screen too. It's a good thing I get to cut that out. I was watching. I was watching a video for a raunchier channel that we do. I had myself on mute, but now I am unmuted. Um, I love that. We're gonna get that nice and edited. You like that imagery?
Oh yeah, another intro I could never live up to. Thank you for that. And
That's that's okay. Just look forward to when this dies down. The imagery that we're going to make for different segments you're going to have, and I'm trying to get Harold to give me some segments for him to do. So I'll hold my breath
yeah,
and see when that happens. But in terms of your overall assessment of the conversation that we had today about teacher pay, I know we could talk about. We did a short episode, we could talk about this ad nauseum.
Hmm.
But just some final thoughts you'd like to give on that topic.
Yeah, I think what's really unfortunate is a lot of the substantive things that I was trying to bring up. Those are, and I could approach it, and I'll tell you, well, you can look at it this way, you can look at it that way, and I'll bring up some factual and some questions of, okay, who pays, who benefits, and that doesn't provide an answer. That's part of how you will look at a situation and make choices in the face of trade-offs, in face of limited information, but also based on information, right? Am I paying my teachers in my school district enough? How many of them are leaving? How easily are you filling positions, right? At a market level, beyond what we think is the dignity of the teacher and all of that, that's a question that you have to ask. And that's very relevant. Am I getting qualified people? Am I getting the kind of applicants I want? And that will drive the marketplace. Is that what these folks out there are talking about, though? And again, we have the idiocracy going on, and we have people saying, we have Moms for Liberty taking over school boards and worrying about banning books, paying consultants hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of, hiring a really good math teacher, paying, because it's hard to get good math teachers because they can get jobs in other areas where they make more money. And so you got to pay them more, right? That's the market logic. But if you're paying a $400,000 to some conservative consultant that's telling you why you should ban these books, well, my sister got caught up in this. My sister was outed. Somebody in New Jersey. My sister's a teacher in New Jersey, and she was actually like one of the top 10 highest paid teachers in New Jersey. And because they're public officials, there you can look up everybody's salary. And so, like, some Republicans were doing a hit job on her, putting her name out there. Right, her name is not the same as mine, so but and the thing about it was, one, I looked up what she made, and it wasn't that much. You know, it was over six figures, but it wasn't, it started with a one, and, it wasn't. And I'm like, New Jersey, man, that's not that much to live in New Jersey. And I'm just sitting there going, these guys are complaining that she's making all this money. And I'm going, holy crap, she's in the top 10 making, that's the top 10. And a very different point of view. Right. And so you say, and this is not the number, but oh, wow, this high school teacher, look, someone else on the list, he's making 135,000. Oh my God. Now in North Carolina, that sounds like a really great salary. Right? But up there, it's not, and it's not that much. And I'm like, okay, so everyone else makes less than that, and they live in New Jersey. By the way, why did my sister make that much money? Because she coached, she added on, she did additional things that were incentivized. She was the cheerleading coach. Convert, she was a cheerleading coach. It's so funny. My sister was a jock in high school, so now she's a cheerleading coach for 3 different seasons. So she gets paid for that activity. And that adds on, right? So why did she get paid so much? Because she worked her ass off, right? And so it was one of these things of like, look, you can vilify her, but you're totally outside of context. You're outside of everything. And it just is that kind of level of debate. And the fact that people are out doing that, politicizing it and putting it around, not thinking about it rationally at all, is, forget talking about investments. Forget to talk all that other stuff, because we're just not there. We're going to talk about it as the symbolic issue and try to make some and vilify the vilification. The idea that you need to vilify the other side, right? That is so endemic in, honestly, a lot of Republican stuff. Although on the left, the vilification of boomers by young people mirrors that. Although there's a lot of research that shows it is not even-handed. It's much more of a right-wing thing to create enemy images. There's a little of it on the left, and so it's not. I'm not going to go all, but that as part of our political culture in general, left, right, whatever, the need to vilify other people is what is killing killing these debates, because you don't talk policy, you don't make rational decisions with people that you consider communist, socialist, fascist,
There's
another.
a comment that said, "We get our politics from comedians and our jokes from our politicians." Oh man! So, Harold, what are your final thoughts on the subject that we approached today?
Well, to Dave's point, and I agree. Part of the challenge that we have is, and if I can append part of what he was saying, is the overall goal of our elected officials is motivated by their hidden agenda. Really, there's an effort to privatize education for the benefit or detriment of our society. Even when the whole vouchers movement started, when we're talking about school funding, it was really the goal was to get public dollars into private schools. That was the goal. And in Florida, they've succeeded at finally getting that done, achieving that goal. But they used a shiny object to facilitate that process in the creation of charter schools. Because I don't know any business that's doing badly that's not going to reinvest in itself to make the necessary improvements that are, quote unquote, being highlighted, outlined, or shout out, whether they're true or false. And because it has been politicized, again, from my analysis, it has always been about getting public dollars into private schools. And for years, or for decades for that matter, and Dave could probably speak even stronger to this, of the number of court cases that were shot down because of it. So what did they do? They created charter schools, pulling funding from public schools, but I never hear, as Dave was pointing out, any charter school teachers information put out there, any criticism of charter school teachers, even though we know they operate by a different set of rules here in Florida. I'm not sure about New Jersey and other states, but I know in Florida, we have a 3-tier education system. There's one set of rules for public schools, one set of rules for charter schools, and one set of rules for private schools. Some of them all standardized testing, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, even when it comes to the hiring of teachers, there are 3 different sets of rules. And charter schools can apply for waivers here in Florida so that they don't have to have a state-certified teacher in the classroom. And then when it comes time to compensate, they don't have to worry about it because these private companies who have charter schools can control whatever that wage is going to look like. And with the issue of economics in Florida, particularly in Miami-Dade County, you can't afford to live in Florida, especially South Florida, on a teacher's salary. You can't. You can't even, it's going to take 2 or 3 teachers living together to afford a decent place to live in South Florida. And that is probably one of the most disrespectful gestures that we could even put out there for them to have to deal with. And so I'm hoping, and my prayer is that as we look at this institution of education, we look at and pay attention to and prioritize the investments that need to be made. And if the system needs to be, I guess you could say, burned to the ground and rebuilt, let's rebuild it. But the moment you privatize it, it's going to be more profit-driven without the desire to do what's necessary for the people, meaning our students. And once that happens, it will no longer be, they'll claim it to be a merit-based system, but it won't be. We can go back to the former segregation school academies that existed way back when, because even now, charter schools can discriminate. Private schools can discriminate if they deem it necessary. As long as it's not overtly done, they can do it. And they're doing it, eyes wide open while still receiving those same dollars. So I'm hoping again, this education conversation can go in so many ways, but looking at the economics of it, the goal has always been to siphon monies from the public school system and give it to the private school system. But they had to utilize the charter school system to allow that to transpire. And I'm hoping and moving forward that we as a society pay closer attention and do what's right by our children so that they can get the best education that they are entitled to so that they can have the best future afforded to them. I will land my plane. Thank you.
That's the second time you've landed. Hey, I've also gotten to know you two better. I used to ask you your final thoughts with about 3 minutes left in the show, and I learned to ask you your final thoughts, both of you, with 15 minutes left in the show, so that I could get it all in. Harold, thank you for joining us.
There's almost like 9 minutes left by this clock.
Yeah, well, we started late. Hey, Dave, stop talking bad about Republicans. People are going to start thinking you're a Democrat.
Oh, God, let's not do that.
Okay, well, I mean, people are starting to think you are.
I'm not talking bad about Republicans. I am talking bad about MAGA. I am talking bad about the right-wing populists that are in there. And there are Republicans who are, and in fact, a lot of the ways I am talking about this, the things I'm suggesting, look at it from a market point of view. You could have Jack Ryan in here, right, hanging out with me, and and I am actually what Democrats would vilify. By the way, the kinds of things I was laying out from the Democratic point of view would be vilified as being neoliberal, right? And kind of using government to make citizens into good earners and good corporate. That entire thing, the way I was talking about it, has been vilified and rejected by progressives, right? And so I'm kind of like, geez, I wish I could go back to war against Democrats over these issues, but I'm kind of about market issues and not war, but have a discussion and say, all right, well, where are the limits? Where do we go too far? What is the truth here? Right? Get back in a good discussion over what I think is important. But no, I got these idiots, Moms for Liberty, and
well, Dave,
their issues.
Dave, in everybody's defense, you do have a face of a James Bond villain.